Right, welcome. I'll give it a couple of seconds just to check that we're live. Brilliant. My name's Yoni Ejo, and I'm an adopter and an adopted person, and I'm also a social worker, and I've worked for 30 years with children in care and foster carers and adopters. And like to welcome you to the next session of Let's Play, building, developing relationships through play, and introduce my colleague, Keeley.
Hi, folks. Nice to see you again. Yeah, it's lovely to meet you. As Johnny said, I've been a play therapist for about nearly over 13 years now, getting towards 14. And if you've tuned into the other sessions, you know there's nothing I like than talking about play. Sometimes it's hard for Yoni to get a word in edgeways. And so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about lockdown and how to cope, but also I'm not just going to talk about play, we're actually going to do a bit of play tonight. So we're going to spend a bit of time being playful too. So that should be a lot of fun.
That sounds great. I suppose just to recap really why we thought that this was a good thing to do, to give adopters and foster carers an opportunity to really talk about things that they don't get to talk about usually, and play is so important, and in my experience a lot of times it's made some real changes within fostering or adoption households, so really welcoming the conversation. So I'll hand over to you, Keeley.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. Yeah, I think to talk about lockdown and maybe in the context of play two just feels so relevant at the moment. I think unless you were like particularly psychic, I don't think anyone really anticipated that would still be in this kind of position now, and that the situation would still be so restrictive. And I certainly think there's maybe, once people got over the initial kind of shock of being in lockdown, actually a lot of the conversations I heard were people actually kind of embracing that time, working from home, so being at home more, not having to do those kind of like early, often very stressful runs for nursery and school, having extra time to connect with your children. But I think now it's maybe a little bit wearing. It's that kind of time of year anyway. It's cold and it's dark, and we're maybe all just feeling some kind of lockdown fatigue. So I just wanted at first just to spend a little bit of time just to go over a few kind of thoughts really about lockdown and how to cope in lockdown. And I think for children who have been in this position, it could actually be quite challenging. So, really for many children, they had a very kind of, the day-to-day life, they were going to school, they were doing activities, whatever they were doing, and then all of a sudden overnight, it all stopped for all of us. But particularly for children, that's very hard to comprehend, especially when they're very young, and maybe it's hard to kind of make sense of that cognitively. The world just came to an abrupt end and everything changed, and I think that's difficult for any child. But I'm also very mindful that for children whose lives have been punctuated a lot by loss, which could have been very abrupt. Again, that maybe they've had to be removed from home very quickly, or there's been a change in placement. That this actually could be like a reactivation of that time, and so some of their response to that, some of how they're kind of coping with that, in lockdown, could really be taking them back to other times where they've had losses like this, where the whole environments have changed. Fortunately for the children now, they've got you, and you've still stayed the same. That the home environment has still stayed the same, but it might just be reactivating some of that, and you might be seeing some of that in the behaviours. So that can be a real stress. And it's been a stress for all children. So there's been actually lots of surveys done, and a lot of the conversations I've had with other parents, and in experience with my own children and my children's friends, is there's been a lot of regression. So
Right.
babies and toddlers are maybe looking to kind of feed more. They want more milk, they want more cuddles, they're more clingy. They don't really want to be put down. They're getting anxious when you're leaving the room. Children that were maybe managing well toilet training have gone back a step or two. Just all those kind of behaviours that maybe you'd kind of worked on. You maybe been seeing some kind of regressions in that, and I think it's just to kind of reassure you, that. I mean, it's upsetting to see, especially when you put a lot of hard work in, but it's almost okay. And it's to try not to try and push them forward again. I think it's just to kind of stay there and maybe acknowledge those anxieties.
Do you think children? Do you think children pick up the anxieties of those around them?
Oh, I do. I think children are I call vibe magnets. They just, I think, especially for children where they become very hypervigilant because of the previous experiences. Particularly those children are really picking up on that, and that leads really well into my second point, which is about being honest with the children. When children get parts of a story, but they don't get all of it, they fill those blanks in with their own fantasies, their own ideas, and they can be wildly inaccurate. But that's what they're going to do. So it's really important to be honest with them, but to keep it contained and to keep it child appropriate. We don't want to raise their anxiety. Older children will be maybe hearing stuff off the radio or seeing stuff on social media, watching TV when the news is on. And again, they try to take that in and make sense of it. And I think it's just really important just to kind of help them to make sense of that and to contain this. We're all in this boat, aren't we? And for once in our lives, adults actually don't know what's going to happen. We're all living with that uncertainty as well. But I think it's just reassuring the children that they're safe with you and you're going to keep them safe. This won't last forever, especially now when there's talks of vaccines that are being found and that being rolled out, that maybe later in 2021 this landscape might be different again. It might be safer. We might be able to go back to some of the activities we've enjoyed in the past without so much of this pandemic kind of hanging over us. So just to kind of be child appropriate with that, I think it's really important. Otherwise, the children just make up their own story to it as well.
I know my partner's grandchildren. One has been sent home twice on two separate occasions because the bubble has been compromised. So that also adds to their anxiety, but also spending quite long, extended periods of time at home, which can be a challenge.
Yeah, and it really challenges that kind of need to be consistent as well, to try and keep routine. So all the schools and nurseries were closed, then they've opened, and then a lot have had to kind of shut down again. So just as children are kind of getting into the momentum of this and the swing of things again, it's all been kind of taken back. And it changes everything again. So again, it's really important just in those areas that you can, just to try and keep some kind of routine and some kind of sense of normality. So bedtimes, waking up times, meal times, bath times, all those kind of times that you can kind of keep consistent. Try and do that just so they've got some kind of anchor points in the day where they just really know what's going to happen. Can just really help them have a sense of security. There's some reassurance in that they kind of have some sense of what will happen in a day. But again, it is challenging because the landscape's changing all the time. We're moving into full lockdowns, into changing into different tiers, which means different things, and it is a challenge.
Right. What are there particular things that you advise to if a child's particularly anxious?
Sorry,
Are
Yoni,
there, are there sorry, are there things that parents can do if a child's particularly anxious or feeling a little bit at sea? Are there strategies that can help calm them down?
yeah, I mean, I think definitely those honest conversations, um, and trying to explore what those anxieties might be. Like I say, children make certain fantasies about it, um, so it's about exploring that and maybe kind of untangling,
Mm,
what they're kind of feeling anxious about. Maybe even trying to play it out or drawing a picture about it. So sometimes when children just don't have those words, if you were
right.
using toys or drawing a picture, maybe what they were anxious about, that can really help as well. And just if they were kind of getting themselves into a very wound up, kind of anxious state, maybe getting very panicky, just using those. There's lots of kind of different techniques, like kind of visualizations, or even those techniques like. Now I'm going to try and remember off the top of my head, where you're coming as you thinking like 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, just to try and help them kind of refocus and bring them back
Okay.
into the room if they were in a particularly very panic state. Things like that can just help in that moment. um yeah, and visualization, stuff like that, and just having some really nurturing times in the day. You might find now that the children are more kind of wanting more kind of physical contact, more cuddles, and just dish it out. We're feeling stressed, and um cuddles are good, and they're good for us too. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I guess my last point, and it kind of actually there's 2 points. The next one is to be fun. So, um, especially when we were in the very first lockdown, I'm sure the amount of time children spent on computers and watching the TV and stuff went through the roof. As well as having to maybe do the schoolwork on the computer, they were maybe looking to computers like gaming or the internet or TV for some entertainment too, and certainly for parents who have to work from home. Sometimes that was their only option too, was to, pop a DVD on for a while so they could get like an important phone call done. Um, and maybe that leaves some kind of parents anxious about that. And I think, given the circumstance, a bit more extra time on these devices is okay. But I think it's also a time just to try and seize a few more moments, just to kind of be playful and connect playfully and creatively with your children. So, there's maybe a chance just to kind of maybe just again, if you kind of think about that, kind of giving routines, maybe just now just setting like, okay, 45 minutes on the computer, and then we're going to go out for a walk or go and play football, or I don't know, shoot some hoops in the back garden. If you've got
Mm.
small children, maybe we can do fun things like getting cardboard boxes this time of year. If you're doing a lot of internet shopping for Christmas, there's going to be plenty of cardboard boxes in the house. So maybe things like that. To make things with the cardboard boxes, games, or make them into little houses or huts or rockets. Just to be really creative with those kind of things. And for those of you with like children who are much older, who are teenagers and almost like hibernating in the bedrooms, maybe they won't be interested so much in the board games. If you're lucky, you might get them out to go for a walk with you or something. But why not join them playing the computer games? You might need a bit of teaching.
That's true.
It's still a way to kind of connect and to be together, and it just means that they're not up there all on their own, in a sea of mugs and bowls and plates that always seem to gravitate upstairs when you have teenagers.
Yeah.
So just finding different ways to connect. And with older kids, that might just be one of the ways to do that. And I guess
certainly
go on, sorry, Yoni.
I certainly found early on my two teenage girls spent quite a lot of time downstairs, and we actually had quite a good chats, which we probably wouldn't have had it not been for lockdown. But as it carries on, I think they are struggling with not being able to see their friends and go out, and it's a bit of a battle, sort of negotiating what's okay and what isn't sometimes.
Yeah, and our novelty wears off.
Yeah.
And the last, I think, really important one is just to take care of yourself, which is easier said than done. It might not look like how it normally did. You can't go out and do your groups or connect with other parents like we used to. But I think it's just trying to make time for yourself where you can. Maybe taking up another hobby, or just making sure you got time just to chill out, watch a movie, have a nice bath, do something relaxing. It's just to make sure I find in this lockdown people are getting really tired, and I think it's because we're always in that being on state. So a lot of this kind of the pandemic, when we don't feel safe, it takes us to a different part of our brain called the reptilian brain, and that's where all your fight and flight and freeze stuff is. So when you don't feel safe, you kind of go into that part of your brain. So it just makes us like very vigilant all the time. We're looking out, we're on high alert all the time. And that can really make people really feel quite exhausted, which I think was part of this lockdown fatigue comes from. It's that, you're going out, keys, wallet, have I got hand sanitizer? Have I got a mask? You're going around risk assessing things in a very different way, things you wouldn't have, worried about before. You're having to think about now, and that can be quite tiring. So I think just having that time to take some care for yourself as well can be really useful. We can't pour from an empty cup, so you've got to fill yourself up too. Always easier said than done, but it does need to be done.
Okay.
So I just thought we would maybe try now something playful. Yoni and I have had a few technical issues about how to share the photo, but on the Ambitious Adopters page, Yoni put a photo up earlier of random objects I found around my house, which actually kind of caused me a bit of concern about how many random objects I had just floating around the house. So if you just want to have a moment just to look at that, it's just have a look at those things. I just picked them up from around the house, but it's just to think about different ways you might use them to be able to play with your own children. So I'll try and remember off the top of my head, but there's a takeaway menu, there's shells, a dice, a comb. I'm pulling some things out of the bag now that I have a gift bag, lollipop sticks, a couple of tea lights, pegs. Most people have pegs in the house, sunglasses, some like gift wrap string, lots of that. If you've got any ideas, just put them in the comments. Have a look, and we'll maybe just leave a moment just for people to put some ideas in how you could use those items to play with your children. And then I'll put Yoni on the spot as well. So
yeah, it's interesting that sometimes children are much more interested in the everyday objects than actually these really expensive bought toys that you might think are really advantageous and attractive, and sometimes they're more interested in other things.
Right, I tell you what, in about 4 weeks, you're going to see that absolutely in action all over the world, where children are playing more with the cardboard box than the toy. So often you see that, don't you? That actually it's those mundane kind of random everyday objects that children are so good at finding ways to play with, and especially when a Christmas or a birthday or another special celebration where there's been gifts given. Quite often adults were like, "Oh, I can't believe it! I spent all that money and everything buying this really thoughtful, probably expensive present, and now here they are just getting more enjoyment out of the box." So.
No, absolutely. I remember my parents buying me a bike and me getting told off because I was spending more time in the box than I was with the bike.
A box can be so many things. I suppose a bike can be as well, can't it? So.
So I was thinking some of the objects that you've got, the takeaway menu. Perhaps you could play restaurants, and or it could be a checklist for checking off things in the house, maybe.
Yeah.
And pasta shaker. There's a tub, and pasta shakers or making a bit of an instrument would be great.
Yeah, they work really well. And my tub was it's like an old tub that had vitamins in it, so it's got like a safety lid on it. But if you didn't, you could just do that with so like a mineral water bottle. And then if you've got very wee ones, very small children, just put some sellotape around the lid too to make sure they can screw it, so they don't get the small items inside. But yeah, I've made that one, and that works really well. Plenty of singing to do with that one, or just making a lot of noise.
The tea lights. Children really like candles and lights, don't they? Obviously, playing with them safely, but being able to light things, kids really love that.
Yeah, and the tea light I've got, you just switch it on. It's with a battery.
Right.
I guess you've got stuff like that. You could then maybe kind of extend that play further and make a den. When I was a child, my mum always used to get two of the dining room chairs and put a tablecloth over it, and it used to make a great den. And then if you had tea lights in it, there could be like a camping adventure, or maybe they could use a little torch. I think it's just and children find their own ways to play with this that we never think of, but it's just I think what I really want to kind of show from this kind of activity is that you don't always have to be like going out and buying new things. That there's things around the house to hand that you don't have to spend any money on because they're there already, that children get a lot of enjoyment out of. So the gift bag can be great. A lot of children, especially younger children, just love going around just filling a bag with things and emptying it out. The dice you could roll, and if you land on a certain number, you've got to like do a certain action or something. You could make it up as you go along. I'm trying to we look in the bag, see what else I can see. The comb, you could be playing hairdressers with that. That a few times, and children have actually got brushes actually tangled and stuck in my hair. I could cut my hair. There's lollipop sticks. So again, there's probably things you can do with that just on its own, but you could also just like maybe cut out a face on a piece of paper, stick it on, and there you are. You've got like yourself some little puppets to talk with. So there's just lots of different things you can do. It's just about being playful and creative. And if you feel a bit dry on ideas, then just put these things out, in front of the children and see what they make from them. Go with that.
I'll think of 96 different things that you wouldn't have dreamt of, I'm sure.
Yeah, they're great at that.
That sounds really good, and it's good to not have to buy lots of new things, and that importance of imagination, isn't it?
Yeah, and especially this time of year where you may be just trying to hang off buying more stuff because you know that Christmas is just around the corner, and so you don't want to kind of be buying lots of other things before Christmas time. Can be really useful, but it's a great activity for any time of the year.
Great. Is there anything that else you want to cover before we pick up a couple of the questions from last
I
time?
don't think so. Well,
No?
I have
Okay.
I'm mindful of the time too.
Sorry?
I'm mindful of the time, and I've always
Yeah.
waffling. Yeah.
Not at all. It's been really helpful. One of the adopted parents asked, they were struggling about having two children and them each individually accessing different activities. So playing with one parent, one with the other, and of trying to avoid a constant fear of the other child of missing out. So they both sort of independently were jealous of what each other were doing. And that even happened when the children's both options and play were quite familiar to each other, but they couldn't give something new to one without the other. I just wondered whether you had any thoughts about that situation.
Do the parents say how old the children are?
I think they're toddlers.
Right. Okay. So they're quite small, and
Yeah.
yeah, playing with toddlers is always challenging, isn't it? Because they're just so whatever this is, I'm playing with, the grass always looks greener on the other side, doesn't it? And they always want that. And they're really in the very, very early stages of understanding what it's like to share. I wonder if they can, as a group, just all come together and play together.
Right.
So the children, and then they can maybe kind of then be practicing like turn taking skills with them as well.
Right.
Or maybe swapping over so that they know it might just take like a bit of an egg timer or a little, the wind up time as you get in the kitchen, and they have so much time with each parent, and then they swap over so they both get a chance for some kind of individual time with each parent and a chance to kind of do the activity, go over to that greener grass, I guess, and
right, that's a good idea.
Just to kind of give that, but I'm not sure if that's helpful. I really got the point of that question.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. The other question was, what do you do when your child says no to everything that you're suggesting when you're playing with them?
Yeah, again, is that child quite young?
They're not. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, yeah. The child that says no to everything.
Yeah.
So I guess it's about maybe just kind of flipping that over to them and saying, well, what would you like to do? And maybe starting where they want to start. Sometimes it can be like control. Sometimes it's about maybe they're anxious about kind of starting activity. Maybe they feel like they would not sure what to do, or they wouldn't be successful in that activity. So I'd be kind of flipping that over to the child. What is it that you want to do? And might be not, I don't know. Then they could like totally stump you, couldn't they, and say nothing. But it's just like, maybe just kind of start. It might be like maybe like you have to start with a computer game, or you might have to just start by just like watching a TV program together and just building up. I think it's kind of getting that, trying to maybe establish that kind of sense of connection with each other, and maybe just showing a bit of your playful side without it kind of feeling a bit too in the child's face. And starting from there, but I'll be allowing the child to kind of take the lead on that, or give them two choices. Say we could do this or we could do that, and then let the child choose. If they were really struggling themselves to think of an idea, then I'd maybe present them with two options and see which one they'd like to take. See if that kind of helps.
Right, that's really helpful. Thank you, Amy. Okay, that's the end of the questions that I'd had from other adopters. So just to cover, we've got a session next Thursday on the 3rd of December, same time at 8 o'clock. And you were saying that we were looking at coping over Christmas.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's a lot of things with coping, isn't there? There's a lot to cope with. There's coping with lockdown, coping with Christmas, and then coping with a lockdown Christmas.
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, but next week we'll focus on kind of coping with Christmas, and in that I'll probably like just think a little bit too. I mean, some of you might be super organised already and have all those Christmas presents already bought and wrapped. But for those of you who haven't, myself included, then maybe kind of just think a little bit about kind of choosing toys at Christmas might be useful too. But I think Christmas is often such a loaded time, isn't it? There's so much pressure at Christmas, and it can be a really difficult time for children who no longer live with their birth families. It can bring a lot up for them. So next week we'll focus on that and how to support children through this festive, quite tricky season to navigate.
Brilliant. All right. Well, I look forward to that. Thank you so much for your time. I hope people have found it useful. And if you're coming in and in watching it on the replay, do let us know that you're here and your comments. So thank you very much, Keeley, and speak to you next week.
Thanks, folks. See you next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.